Hello there guys and welcome back to 100% Chelsea for the first preview, for the first Premier League preview of the season. And it's great getting back into it, getting back into that rhythm. And you've seen me and most of us off the channel being rather negative, pessimistic looking at the upcoming season. We only have about 14 first team players available tomorrow, so that's not great. But I'll talk about that more later. But I'm not too optimistic about looking at the whole season, but I am optimistic looking at tomorrow. But I'll talk about that. So starting off with the opposition, Burnley, as I usually do. So obviously it's very difficult to predict how any team is going to do, especially the teams lower down the table. Burnley, they've made a few signings. The one sticking out is probably Jonathan Walters, who they've signed from Stoke. But they've also lost a few big players and a few big players for them. Biggest one probably being Andre Gray to Watford only a few days ago, who along with Sam Vokes was definitely their main man last season. And also they've lost Michael Keane, the guy got into team of the season, didn't he? Or was it just FIFA team of the season? Whatever it was. But they lost him to Everton. So losing those two will probably have a big loss, a big effect on them, they finished last season in 16th on 40 points, 6 points ahead of relegated Hull City, obviously finished in 18th. So, although I think Burnley could well be relegated this season, sorry Burnley fans, if any of you are watching, but as we learned from playing them away at Turf Moor last season, they're a very physical team. They're not a bad team. They're usually quite solid at the back, although their away record last season, compared to their home record, was just absolutely dreadful. I think they only picked up like 4 or 5 points away from home, and all the other, 35 points or whatever it was, they picked up at home. So, it should be fairly straightforward. And also, obviously, losing Michael Keane is basically impossible to properly replace for them. So, maybe their solidity at the back will suffer as well. We'll have to wait and see. But as the saying goes, no game in the Premier League is ever easy. So, neither will this one. Getting straight into Antonio Conte's press conference, which basically just finished a few minutes ago. And, he talked about a few very interesting things as well. So, first thing he said is the team is working incredibly well. The commitment is incredible. He said even better than last season, which is obviously good to hear. Which, it has to be, considering we only have 14 players tomorrow. So, at least the commitment has to be there. Otherwise, it's just never going to work. Then he was asked about the transfer window and, all that kind of stuff. Questions that he's clearly a bit annoyed to keep having to answer because he's been answering them since the press conferences ahead of the pre-season games. And his reply was, "My job is what happens on the pitch, and the club are trying to do their best, to work in the transfer market." That to me sounds a lot like he's had a proper talking to, but people above him. You know what I mean? Because that answer last week sounded very different when he's like, "No, we need more players and I don't have enough players and this and that." No, he's just saying, no, it's just, just work on the pitch. So, just re-emphasising that he's only first team head coach and not first team manager. Then he was asked about Diego Costa, just said there's absolutely no news on whether he's going to return or when he's going to leave and who he's going to leave for and all of that. And then the big news, the bummer of the day. Pedro is not available for tomorrow's game. And not due to suspension, because, at least I wasn't sure whether he will be suspended with this straight red card against Arsenal. No. He picked up an ankle knot during that game against Arsenal, probably while slide tackling Elneny's Achilles, which he got sent off for, I can imagine. Maybe not, but, and he wasn't able to recover in time. So that's great. So, I thought we'd have 15 players available tomorrow. No, it's just down to 14. Great. Love it. Isn't that great? Then for some reason, people like Wenger talked about Chelsea for some reason. I don't really know why. Conte was asked about it because they apparently have an issue with her loan system and other things. And Conte's reply was simply that he isn't looking for any sympathy of other coaches, which, it's a good response, but I don't really get. First of all, why other managers talk about us? Why? And second of all, why the fuck do journalists waste their questions on things like that? Obviously, he's going to give an answer like that is no real answer anyway. And the last thing you basically talked about is that Morata is working very well, is improving a lot, has improved a lot in the last 10 days. Also his physical condition, and he's starting to understand what Conte wants from him during the game. And he also re-emphasised that the striker position is the most difficult to adapt to, more than any other position. So he says for any other new players, it's a lot easier to sort of just come in because it's similar at most teams. But for the striker, it really varies with the manager, what the manager wants from you as a striker. So he said that's why it's a lot more difficult to adapt to a manager in that position. Now, talking about Chelsea and how I think we're going to line up, how I think we're going to do, and like I said before, as much as I'm worried about the season as a whole, sort of in brackets, if we don't make some good signings, if we do, we're going to be fine because we still have a good team. We just don't have enough players. But this game we should really win. Doesn't matter if we have 14 players available or 25. That shouldn't make a difference. But this is how I think we'll line up. Courtois will, obviously be in goal. And the back three will most likely change. Just obviously Victor Moses is suspended. Again, I know you don't like me mentioning it, but he's suspended because of those 2 yellow cards in the FA Cup final against Arsenal. So I expected back three to be Antonio Rudiger at right centre back. Making his debut in a competitive game, officially competitive game. Obviously he came on against Arsenal with David Luiz and Gary Cahill next to him. Wing backs, I suppose, will then be Azpilicueta on the right and Marcos Alonso on the left. The 2 central midfielders can't change from the Community Shield or any pre-season game because we only have to because Bakayoko is obviously still injured. So that will be Conte and Fabregas, who, Fabregas I still think is an issue playing against a top team, a top midfield. But against a team like Burnley should actually be, very beneficial to blame rather than, having Matic if we didn't sell him or Bakayoko if he was fit. So like I said, no Pedro. Pedro injured. So we're in a difficult situation again. Think back of the game against Inter Milan. Was it that? Yeah. When we started Michy Batshuayi up front and Morata is the left winger / left number 10. Will he go with that again? Will he start Musonda, who came on against Arsenal? But if you remember back to what Conte said before the Arsenal game, when he talked about, why he played that way against Inter, when he said, with Hazard and Pedro injured, I didn't have any other option than playing Morata there. So that really doesn't make it sound like Musonda is going to stand any chance of starting that game. Although I'm not the biggest fan of Morata as a left winger. I mean, obviously we've only seen it for one game. 1 game and a bit. So obviously he came on against Bayern Munich playing there as well. But still, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I just can't see Musonda starting. So I'll go with Morata as the left winger / left number 10. Michy Batshuayi up front, and obviously Willian, who is the only fit winger we do have, will obviously start on the right. I mean, there is always a slight chance that we'll change to a 4 at the back formation, in theory, with Victor Moses being suspended. Possibly Azpilicueta at left back, Rudiger at right back, or Azpilicueta at right back and Alonso at left back. But I personally doubt it. It would surprise me if we change formation for that game. So like I said, 14 first-team players. So adding to that starting 11 that I've just run you through, we have 3 more actual first-team players to fill the bench with. There's Caballero, so goalkeeper, which hopefully won't get used. Not like 2 years ago when Courtois got sent off against Swansea. Christensen, who hasn't made his professional debut for Chelsea, I think. No, I don't think he has. And Charlie Musonda. I'm guessing Carl Scott, who travelled along to pre-season, will be on the bench. Probably Boga as well, who isn't officially part of the first-team squad. That's why, he doesn't count as that. But who else? Who else but, those 3, Carl Scott and Boga, will be on the bench? I've got no bloody idea. No idea at all. But yeah, talking about how the game will go, in my opinion, how I think we'll do. So Burnley will probably sit deep. Why wouldn't they? They're playing the champions away from home. They probably will be. So it will be up to us to break them down without being vulnerable on the counter-attack. So we have to be wary of that. And, we have to look out for that, definitely. Obviously, losing Gray is a big sort of loss for them in that sense as well, because he was so fast and the other strikers aren't really particularly pacey. So that will definitely help us being less vulnerable on the counter-attack from them. But I'm confident that we can generally, break them down and win. So my prediction is going to be a solid 2-0 win. Don't think we're going to shine crazy. Don't think we're going to smash them, like 5-0 or anything. But I think we'll display a decent performance, keep a clean sheet, which is important. Yeah, I don't know who'll score because I don't know who'll start. But as long as we don't draw 2-0 and Courtois gets sent off, which, that would just mean we'll finish 10th again because exactly the same thing happened against Swansea 2 years ago. And that would just mean Illuminati is confirmed, doesn't it? But yeah, that's really it from me. Leave me all of your thoughts down in the comment section below. What would be your starting 11? Obviously now with Pedro injured, Moses suspended, Bakayoko still injured, Hazard injured obviously. Who would you start? What would you do? Would you play Morata on the wing? Would you play Musonda? Would you play a 3-5-2? Although we don't have 3 CMs. Would you play Willian as a kind of CM but more of an attacking midfielder? Just give me your ideas. Leave it down in the comment section below. Leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Massively do appreciate that. Thank you guys for watching. Up the Chels. Come on to Chelsea, finally the premise back, and I'll see you next time.